Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. We are back. Got two special guests, no strangers to this podcast and just the Salt Strong ecosystem in general. Been who knows how many times Captain Dylan Hubbard's been on videos, and of course Travis here now, probably third or fourth time back. Every time we talk about conservation, Travis Thompson seems to pop up. And there's an amendment coming up here in 2024, and it is Amendment 2, and it's about the right to hunt and fish. And there's been a lot of confusion about what does this do? What doesn't it do? Does this change rules? Does this make FWC irrelevant or more relevant? And so I wanted to have two guys that are literally involved in a lot of this and are in the meetings and attending a lot of the things that are happening behind the scenes, just to talk about the truth about this amendment. And I know Travis is probably going to say, yes, let's vote yes to it, but let's talk about why and what's going on. So Travis, maybe you kind of kick it off. What is this Amendment 2? Why are we even talking about it? What's changing? Why do we have to have the right to hunt and fish? I thought I could already go out and hunt and fish if I had a license.
Yeah, so this is a great amendment, and I'll let Dylan talk about some of the threats we've kind of seen to fishing just in Florida recently, to kind of give you some color as to why this matters so much. Hunting, you see a lot more threats to it. They're easier to see sometimes because people are like, oh, we don't want you to hunt this species or that species. On the fishery side, we think in Florida, everyone fishes all the time. So where's our threat coming from? But I'll let Dylan, I'll pass it to him in a second. This is a simple amendment. It exists in 23 other states. And there's a targeted goal to get this passed. I think you'd love to have it passed in all 50 states. I think realistically, you could look at 36, 37 states. There's a group called the International Order of Theodore Roosevelt, one of the great conservationists of our time. They're kind of leading the charge to move this through, and they've helped us. We're not where we're at without them. And so this amendment is pretty simple. Takes pretty simple language that has been used in other states, North Carolina, Tennessee, successfully by hunting, fishing groups, and groups that we know and love, your CCAs, your Ducks Unlimited, your Delta Waterfowls, your Safari Club, groups that we trust. It takes language that they've used in other states, and we'll get into some specifics. There's some magic phrases in it. We'll talk kind of about those as we unpack some of this stuff. But Dylan, talk about like Rice's whales or pelicans or any of the stuff you've seen that are like threats on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see every day different threats to our access to the fishery, access to the waterways, and just clean water in general is a big hot button issue for a lot of us, right? But look at what happened on the Skyway recently. They were trying to shut down the Skyway fishing piers because of interactions with pelicans. Also, you look at what happened on 41, DOT trying to stop people from accessing those roadside waterways where we all love to stop and peacock bass fish. The Rice's whales situation in the Gulf of Mexico luckily got shot down, but it could rear its ugly head again. And that petition could very easily come back and eliminate or create these speed zones in the Gulf of Mexico that would virtually eliminate offshore fishing abilities. So there's a lot of threats to our fishing access and fishery industry in general that we need to be aware of and be on the lookout for, and really getting involved in this whole right to hunt and fish process was really eye-opening for me in the aspect of I didn't realize how many threats were so actively engaged going after hunting and fishing until really this process. Because to me, sitting there, I was like, a right to hunt and fish, we already do that. That's our right already. But in reality, it's really scary, the opposition that has come out of the woodwork in opposition of actually enshrining officially the right to hunt and fish and through this amendment. And that to me is a really scary, eye-opening thing that further motivated me to get involved on this and really try to push this over the finish line. And I think you guys should be worried as well with the obscene amount of money and tactics and logistics that are going into fighting the right to hunt and fish and making sure this doesn't pass, which is not good. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of threats on the horizon and a lot of things moving behind the scenes that we might not be aware of. And it's a good idea to get this thing passed and vote yes on Amendment 2.
Dylan mentioned something that's important to say at the outset, which is we do have a statute. We have a statutory, which the legislature could pass a statute at any time. So in Florida, it's 379, 104, 105, I think. It says the legislature recognizes the rights of Floridians to hunt and fish. However, that's not a constitutional right. So if next year the president of the Senate said, hey, I want to change that, I don't like that we have it, and I don't think that's likely next year, but I think it could change on a whim. It's a very easy thing to change within the context of political wins. And hunting and angling, to me, are very bipartisan. Like they should cross all political lines. Whether you wanting to go outside and touch nature and be in nature, red, blue should not matter at all. So this ensconces it permanently in the Constitution. So it would be much harder to undo, much harder to change. If you saw political pressure from either side to remove hunting or fishing in the future, this makes it a very, very, very difficult threshold for them to cross.
Yeah, and I was looking before this interview here on there's no 22.org. It's a website and it's a group that, to your point, Dylan, has a lot of money and a lot of little scare tactics. And I want to talk about all three of these because this is what they're hammering on why this is not a good thing, right? Because let's just talk about both sides of it. I understand why we should vote yes. Let's just look at the other side and talk about the objections. So they say there's three reasons why this group does not like this, and it's a threat to private property rights. So what would change with this? Why would all of a sudden now, if this is a yes, that someone's allowed to come in my backyard and shoot something? Like why is that the number one threat?
So the way this works is when you're working with case law, when you're working with amendments, you try to look for similar language. So there's some magic phrases we call magic phrases in the ballot language and in the amendment itself. By the way, if you read the amendment and you read the ballot language, they're almost verbatim. Like I think it's shortened by like 10 words to fit into the ballot paperwork, but they're pretty close in like, we're not trying to pull a fast one on anybody here, where sometimes you read one and they're drastically different. So those magic words typically are hunting and fishing and taking of wildlife will be the preferred method of managing wildlife. So preferred means or preferred method language. Using traditional methods is always you have to have that language in there because that's court tested. We should talk about traditional methods in a minute. And then typically you see a trespass provision in these amendments. Like if you looked in other states, I think 23 states have this now, set aside Vermont, which passed theirs in 1777. The other 22 have all been passed in the last 30 years. Most of them have some kind of a trespass provision. We were actually asked not to include that by the legislature, judicial, like lawyers, court folks, because when you read when you take a state constitution and you interpret it for case law, you have to read the whole document every time, which means trespassing is already protected. So unless we expressly said in our amendment, we're removing trespass penalties if you're hunting or fishing, there's no reason to be redundant with it. And it kind of creates confusion if you do include it. So there was an intentional choice made by legislators on both sides of the aisle, because let's remember, this passed the House and Senate in Florida to go to the ballot 154-1. And the one was a protest vote. She had no problem with this. She was protesting about something else. So this is a very bipartisan, very safe set of language that everyone is okay with. And there's no reason to, hey, we're just going to say again, trespassing is illegal because we've already covered that. And how often do we say, let's make another law for something?
So to me, I think this further illustrates the importance to vote for this and support it, because some group out there read that ballot language, read that amendment language, found this little loophole that they could basically stand on and say, oh, if you vote yes for this, people are going to be hunting in your backyard, and have twisted this as a reason not to support it. That's scary. That's a lot of legwork someone did to try to subvert this passing.
And so what I'm hearing you guys say is nothing changed. This is not making it legal to go shoot in someone's backyard. Yeah.
No, you can't change that because you're already protected against that.
Right.
I make this argument I make this argument a lot on other regulations. Like we had not to go too far into it, we had a thing called a restricted hunting area a few years back that we pushed back on with FWC. And it was because it was protecting someone from shooting someone's house. And I'm like, they're already protected from shooting someone's house. This is like a solution in search of a problem. And we actually won that because it was redundant. There was no reason for it. You can't shoot someone. You can't shoot it. Like murder is illegal. So having a law that prohibits you from shooting someone seems like we maybe don't need that law because we already have it. So kind of, I don't want to be reductive to that, but like,
yeah, it makes sense. All right. So the other one is a threat to wildlife. And I think this is where another one you could just twist stuff up. This doesn't take away any rules. This doesn't take away FWC. This doesn't take away any limits on anything from duck to red snapper. Like nothing changes with this law. This is just to protect us from some crazy group trying to come in there and say we can no longer hunt or fish. Right. I mean, how could this be a threat to wildlife?
It depends, in my opinion, how you view wildlife, right? If you view wildlife in a fashion that you don't want to ever see harvest of that wildlife, then you could construe this as a harm to wildlife. But if you view wildlife as something that you want to conserve, protect, and have consumptive use in some aspect, then this is healthy. Even if you don't support consumptive use and you want a healthy estuarine environment, you have to have some management of that species, and management through harvest is a really, really good way of doing it. But I'll let Travis take that one because he's a lot more well-versed.
The North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. If you've never read this book, you should read it. It's not heavy in saltwater fisheries, but it is like, not to be sacrilegious, but it's kind of the Bible for wildlife management in this country. And there's no guesswork around this. If you prohibit take of a species, you remove the impetus to protect that species. We could go through state after state after species after species. If you close down take of a species, you remove a heavy impetus to protect that species. And this is a disconnect we often have on the fishery side, because we're like, man, let's close this fishery so that we have more of these fish. And that's just not how it works. And you also are creating an impact, whether you think there's a line there or not. There is reams of, this is not a guy's opinion. This is scientifically peer reviewed. This is the model. You have to have species available for take. So to Dylan's point, technically, Joe, when you and Luke are out there slaying fish with the Slam Shady, like you're harming wildlife because you're hooking them in the lip to someone's interpretation, or, maybe you take a fish home for dinner or whatever. You're harming wildlife. We are conservationists. We are here to make sure there is wildlife for generations to come. And we've got a strong base that we're standing on to talk about this stuff. I don't know what the opposition's got to talk about it. I mean, you could get into the nuance, like sea turtles and shorebirds. Everybody, anybody that's anti-sea turtle? Because I don't. Like that's a tough. I mean, the most ardent fishermen, everybody will make jokes sometimes around management and stuff like that. But sea turtles, no one's anti-sea turtle. No one's on the other side of that. Did you know that trapping is the most important tool for protection of seabirds? because raccoons, possums, coyotes, things like that, predators, mesomammals will get in there and take out, just they'll dig up turtle nests and eat them uncontrollably. You have to be able to manage wildlife populations. There's too many people on the planet, there's too many people in the state to not have human intervention on wildlife management, and we got to be able to do that moving forward. Dylan's laughing at me. I get amped up over this because
That's good.
it's so disconnected from real true conservation to say we don't want to harm wildlife. I don't want to inflict pain on wildlife. I don't want to create suffering for wildlife, to be very clear. But, you know, a one-shot lethal kill of a deer or a cobia, you know, like stuff like that, we've got to be able to take it because it gives us a reason to conserve it.
And also from a scientific perspective, if you lose fisheries dependent science on the hunting side, I'm not as familiar, but I know for the fishing side of things, there's huge arguments. Like people always are talking about like gag grouper right now. We have a super short gag grouper season, but the council, the scientists, they fought really hard to preserve and protect that little bit of access, even if the season is a week long. Look at South Atlantic red snapper season. Sometimes it's 2 days long, but that little bit of access, that little bit of take gives science so much power. If you lose fishery dependent science, you lose a whole half of what's required to have a really good view of what's going on in that fishery, in that biomass, in that population. Look at Goliath grouper. It took years, decades to open Goliath grouper to harvest, and we still aren't happy with the way it's open right now, and it should be open more. But the reason they can't just open it back up is because they can't prove that the fishery can support harvest because they lost fisheries dependent science. And now they've stood it back up with this limited access, and everybody's angry about Goliath grouper still, but we finally have the door open to harvest. And as that door opens to harvest, they rebuild fisheries dependent science. And then over time, they're able to prove, hey, fishery is healthy. We're going to go back to this limited harvest. So it is, from a aspect that Travis was talking about, it's important, but also from a scientific perspective, if you don't have take, if you don't have harvest, you don't have measurable data, which is not good.
You could also look at, so if you go to Audubon's not a hunting organization, or Cornell University, not a hunting school, like they're, both of them would tell you that the reason waterfowl and geese are the only birds that are up is because we assign value to them through hunting. And then to Dylan's point, we do research on them for hunting. So we know really good data around bird populations on those species. Flip that around, when we were going through the pelican saga a year ago, I walked into the room and the first question I asked was, what's the mortality rate on pelicans? What's the recruitment rate on pelican? Like, they're like, we don't have that data. And I'm like, well, we know it on, you know, lesser scaup and canvasbacks. And the scientist looked at me and she said, Travis, those are game species. Like, you guys paid for that. No one's paying for research on pelicans. And to FGA, All Florida, CCA, ASA's credit, like, we sat there and said, look, we're happy to figure out ways to help pay for that. We want the data so that we know, are we really impacting the population, or are you just seeing it because everyone's got a cell phone now? Like, very concerned about the science driving wildlife policy. This is one of the key things in this whole deal. It's a big deal.
Look at red snapper, for example. Just recently, there was a $12 million project over a course of 1 year for red snapper data. And that's not possible without fishing and fishing effort.
Awesome. Let's move to the third one. So we're just going to hit these because this is what the other side is trying to use, essentially scare tactics. And we've already kind of hit two that don't really make any sense. The third one is a threat to marine populations. And in particular, they keep bringing up the gill net. There's a picture of a turtle caught in a net. To your point, Travis, no one sides with that and wants to see turtles like that. But why is this? Why are they claiming that this would be a threat to marine populations and gill nets in particular?
Charismatic megafauna. Turtles get people very quickly. So if they show a picture of a net with a turtle in it, it's very easy. Someone, without doing any research, it's just today's society, right? the headline sells. People don't actually read the article, they read the headline. And you see that picture of the turtle in the net, and it's instantly, well, I'm not voting for that. But it has nothing to do with this whatsoever. And I'll let Travis talk about the traditional methods, because that's basically what negates this point.
Yeah, so I've got a lot to say on this one because it makes me so mad, because I've talked to some of the folks on No On too, and told them, like, this is disingenuous. Like, what you're saying here is disingenuous. First, as I mentioned a minute ago, you have to read the document as a whole. You have to read the Constitution as a whole.
Who's got time for that? It's easier to read a headline than a picture.
So the net ban. Well, and I get that. That's hilarious, but I'm saying, like, the courts have to read it. If you sued and said, oh, now I can use net bans, some Supreme Court justice in Florida or the court is going to have to sit down and say, okay, what pertains to this in the Constitution? And they're going to have to go read, just like if someone sued over trespassing because now they have the right to hunt and fish, the court's going to go read it and say, no, right here it says in whatever section you can't trespass. Net bans were protected. Like, we removed gill nets as part of the Constitution. So there's nothing in this that expressly remediates that. So that's protected in perpetuity until someone wants to write an amendment that changes that. That's protected in perpetuity. This is kind of on top of that. So Dylan mentioned traditional methods, because there's a lot of people are saying, oh, well, now you're going to be able to go harpoon manatees, or now you're going to be able to run gill nets or whatever. Baloney. Traditional methods means that which is legal at the time of passage. So if this passes on November 5th, 2024, then whatever is legal at the time of passage would continue to be legal, although it does not supersede FWC's authority. If they decided in 2025 that spinning reels are harmful to fisheries, they could say, we're going to make a rule to get rid of spinning. They could do that. Like, we would have recourse against it, but they could. FWC still manages the wildlife and the take of fish and wildlife. The last thing I'll mention on this, that's a little bit, it gets a little kludgy, and not a lawyer, right? English guy. But the state of North Carolina was the last state to pass this. I think they passed it in 2016. And CCA North Carolina is actually leveraging the right to fish and hunt to get gill nets removed out of the state of North Carolina, because the courts have determined this rule cannot exist in the abstract. And the silly way I kind of give an example for this is, let's say that tomorrow the state of Florida said, we're going to extinguish all white-tailed deer. We're going to hire a team of sharpshooters, get rid of all of them. And so now there's no white-tailed deer. This really gives us recourse to go say, wait a second. And then the state goes and puts houses everywhere. Like, they let developers just run rampant. This gives us recourse to say, no. We have to actually have fish and game. So if you want clean water, if you want wild lands, if you want to see not just your game species, your deer, your turkeys, your fish, your snook, your trout, if you want to see everything out there, this is a critically important conservation bill, because it's going to ensure, because the law, the amendment, the right cannot exist in the abstract. The state has an obligation to make sure that the right can be exercised. So again, you go do a spill or something somewhere and you wipe out all the fish in an area, or now you've given a recourse to those people to be able to go say, hold on, state, you're not holding your job, because I no longer have the right to fish here because you haven't handled the fishery well. Whether they killed the fish through commercial netting, or they killed them through some kind of other, like I said, a toxic spill or whatever, you've now got a recourse to go back to them and say, no. We have the right to fish, and you are impacting that right by this. What's crazy to me is this is no different than some of the other stuff that the No On 2 folks care about. Like, this is really protecting the same stuff that they want to talk about. Clean water, wild lands. I mean, set aside the taking of fish or game. Like, this is really protecting wild Florida and conservation in our state. And this one amps me up, because people, they just kind of run amok on it, and it's so nonsensical.
And on top of that, the thing that Travis just kind of hit on is the fact that the approach to conservation in general and preserving our beautiful waterways and our lands is really more of a bigger picture, right? If we allow Florida to be developed like crazy and we concrete over the whole state, then any water that hits, because I'm focused on fishing, right? I'm not a big, huge hunter. So my focus can be very tunnelly focused on fishing. And it's easy to forget the fact that if they pave over the whole state of Florida, all of a sudden any water that hits that state doesn't have a filtration system to go through. And all of a sudden our water quality on the coast goes to garbage and then our fishery dies. So it's really important to have this opportunity, this right to hunt and fish, because it's going to force the state to take a smarter approach to development, making sure that we have clean land to clean our water and to ultimately protect. I mean, look at the wildlife corridor right now. Almost 20% of the wildlife corridor is funded by conservation dollars. Almost, I think it's like 90% of the boat ramps are funded by conservation dollars. Look at all the different things, all the science that happens that's funded by conservation dollars. So all of the important environmental aspects to our state are funded by fishermen, by hunters. So if all of a sudden you remove fishing and hunting, even if you're someone who wants to protect the cuddly, cute little animal, really, you should be voting yes on this too, because ultimately those conservation dollars are helping to protect those cuddly little animals statewide. So it's really kind of like Travis said, almost this circular thing. And it doesn't make sense not to support this, because there's such a huge, big driving force with these conservation dollars that are going to help the environment, help our waterways, help our landscapes, and really ultimately improve that Florida lifestyle that we all know and love.
When Dylan says conservation dollars too, like that's the term that we toss around. For a lot of your folks, those are sportsman's dollars, angler dollars, hunter dollars. So a lot of people ask me, why don't hunt or fish? Why should I vote? Like, I don't care about this. Maybe I'll vote yes for it because you asked me to, but I don't care about this. Really, you don't use a boat ramp to go water ski? Like we're in Polk County, Joe. Like water skiing is a huge thing over here. Like you don't use a boat ramp to go water ski. You should thank an angler if you do. You want to go walk the wildlife corridor and take pictures of birds or wildlife, or you want to stargaze, you want to hike with your family or whatever. 20% of the wildlife corridor acquired with sportsman's dollars. So of the existing corridor, that's the largest chunk that is paid for by anyone outside of a government entity. Meaning, like the feds, like if you took Everglades National Park and Ocala National Forest and you lumped all that together as federal dollars, yeah, they've acquired more than 20%. But we, the folks in the Salt Strong community, like we have acquired the biggest chunk of any citizenship by simply buying licenses over generations. Like, because this isn't just a recent thing. This is stuff we've gone back 60, 80 years and done. A Corbett, I think, was the first WMA in the state, and it was bought in the 40s or 50s. So significant impacts way beyond just, hey, we want to go shoot a deer. Hey, we want to go shoot a duck. Hey, we want to go keep a fish. That I tell people all the time, every few years there's a conservation legislation that comes out. A few years back, it was the Great American Outdoors Act, or RAWA was bandied about when it had a lot of life in the federal and in DC. And kind of the advertisement is always, this is the most important conservation legislation of our lifetime. If you live in Florida, this is the most important conservation thing you will ever be able to go to a ballot box and do, is to go there and make sure that we have these kind of protections moving forward, because it is going to be, look around at the growth. I mean, Polk is the fastest. Dylan lives in Pinellas. It can't grow anymore because it's completely grown. There's nowhere else to put stuff. Polk's now the fastest growing county in the country. In the country. In 2 years, we won't be able to be the fastest growing county because they'll have built everything out. And the conversation around water is critically important, because how are we, not just for fisheries, for like life and existence, like how are we recharging the aquifer? How is the water getting to where it's going? How fast is it getting to the rivers and stuff to where it's going? Is it allowed to set? I work with cattle ranchers all the time. The water's allowed to sit in their field, and plants are uptaking the nutrients, and the cattle are grazing the nutrients, and we export the like there's a lot of stuff that happens out there that people don't get in the weeds on, no pun intended. And we kind of like, it's just like going to the grocery store to buy your food. Like you don't really know where your food comes from. You go and get it out of the counter at Publix. This is a much bigger picture. It's a landscape conservation kind of idea. The idea of we've got to protect this as a right because it's the best way for so many of us in this state, whether you own a fishing pole, which I think everyone should, or whether you ever go hunting. I don't think everyone should do that because that'd be a lot of hunters and that creates some pressure. A few more of you could, but whether you own a fishing pole or whether you have a hunting license or not, this is a thing that's going to benefit everyone in Florida in a major way.
Yeah, and to be clear, to back this, back to this one part, if this gets approved, it doesn't mean that gill nets are coming back or that sea turtle, if anything, like you guys have been hitting this over and over again, it's more protection. I mean, it's just the opposite of what these scare tactics are. So, is there anything else that we're missing that the other side, if you will, is saying, here's why this shouldn't happen? I mean, it sounds like I didn't know about the vote to even get here, that it was only one detractor, essentially. That's crazy as it is. So that means that regardless of what side of the political fence you're on, everyone for the most part agrees this is a good idea. But to your point, Dylan, I mean, it is scary. Even the whole pelican thing, I don't think most people realized how hard they were pushing to shut the entire pier down. And that was one little small group that didn't have the same kind of funding that some of these other groups have. I mean, it's wild what can happen and how quickly things can unravel if we sit back and just don't care, don't vote, don't get involved. It's amazing how, like you guys said, boat ramps could be gone. The right to fish in certain areas could be gone. The right to take a boat over 20 miles an hour because of some whale or what, it's wild what can happen in a really, really short amount of time.
And if you look at something like the whale thing, it's really easy for us to be like, that's crazy. How could you set a speed limit in the Gulf of Mexico? That doesn't make any sense. And no one would vote for that. But if you go look at some of those posts that, like, say NOAA does about the whales in the Atlantic, and this little baby whale got killed and they show a photo of it, read the thousands of comments from people from Ohio that want to make sure no one goes over 5 miles an hour ever again in the water because they want to protect the whales. That's the scary part about this, is it's really easy. The pelican situation on the Skyway was a great example. We had sweet little old ladies from Tampa calling me, telling me I'm a danger to society and threatening my life because I was supporting the fact that we should be allowed to fish from the Skyway Pier. It's really easy to get these people spun up who don't maybe fish or hunt or don't understand how we prosecute the fishery so carefully. And we're the biggest conservationists, right? It's easy to take like a photo of a net with a turtle entangled in it and say, this is what we have to stop. We have to stop them from fishing today and get something passed to affect our rights to fish. This passing, voting yes on Amendment 2 is going to protect that. They're not going to be able to utilize these charismatic megafauna, the turtles, the manatees, the bears, the cute cuddlies out there to shut down our access to our right to hunt and fish. So it's super important in my mind to enshrine this and to stop the maybe not active or not involved section of the public, which further outweighs us. You guys got to remember, sitting here watching this video, there's a lot of Salt Strong members. You guys have built an incredible family and a huge number of members, but we're a very small minority. Saltwater fishermen in general is a very small minority of fishermen. And then when you look at the people who don't fish, there's a majority of people who don't get involved in what we do and don't understand it. So it's very easy to get those people riled up about, oh, they're hurting the pelicans. We got to stop them from fishing. And this is important to make sure that we're protected moving forward.
It's also critical. I'll tell you a quick story, and we've got a video out there that All Florida did on snail kites. I know both of you guys have seen it. But to sum it up, like, we discovered snail kites, which are an endangered species. There's about 3,000 of them left in the United States. And we discovered them on a place where we run duck hunts. We run waterfowl hunts there. And we called University of Florida. We called FWC. We're like, hey, just FYI, there's a bunch of birds out here. Like we don't know what to do with that. We're going to keep doing what we do, but do you want to send somebody out here to like look at them? And so they came out and they did a count, and we had probably 10% of the snail kites in the United States on one cattle ranch, one private land holding in South Florida. And they were like, can we come research them? And we were like, sure. And they're like, will you like let us in the gate? We're like, sure. Like, what do you need? They're like, can you ride on the airboat with us and help us? Like, we'd like to know if we can band them and catch them and research them. So it's a critically endangered bird. Sportsmen, hunters are the reason that this bird. So we found probably 100 babies that were raised and fledged and flew away. A bird that we're never going to hunt, have no interest in hunting. If you said, hey, we can start hunting snail kites, I'd say, heck no, I like them too much. You're not hunting snail kites. A bird that's critically endangered existed because of two reasons. One was ranching and one was hunting. And if you've taken either one of those things away, if you took away ranching, they're not going to let us on there to hunt. There's no reason to keep it wild. It's going to become houses. So you keep ranching there. And then the hunting, because we wanted waterfowl hunting, we were able to put water on that property, hold water on that property. And that's the only reason to hold it there is because of the ducks, not because of the cattle. And so by holding the water there, we created this perfect habitat for this endangered species. And we worked with the feds and with the University of Florida and everybody else. And we moved duck hunters out of impoundments, which cost us money because it was the right thing to do we didn't want to create any kind of disturbance near these nests so that these babies could fledge out. And then we went and put a video together so we could kind of tell that story, because the reason I say all that is this is so important. That's a bird that has no bearing on me as a hunter. That's a bird that has no bearing on you as a fisherman, but it has tremendous, tremendous bearing on me as a Floridian and as a person that loves wild Florida. And I think it's really important to remember, you said it a minute ago, we were the first conservationists. Like, we continue to be leading the conservation charge, and we're asking for some help to make sure that we can continue to work on that stuff moving forward. And that's why this is so important, is it is 1,000,000,000% conservation legislation.
Love it. And so you said earlier, 26 states have already done this. We're not the first one to do this, or 24, 20, okay,
20.
to 24. And this is going to be on the November ballot, Amendment 2. And there's been a couple in the past that were kind of confusing. We had to read, it was almost like they hit flipped the yes and no. Like, wait a minute, am I saying yes to this? So this is one that we want to say yes to be clear. If we're into hunting and fishing and want to protect. Yep. Okay.
Or if you're into using a boat ramp, if you're into hiking, if you're into loving wild Florida, you want to vote yes on this.
Yeah. If you like Florida, you vote yes on 2.
I love it. Cool, guys. Anything else on this besides voting yes to Amendment 2 in November? Any other thoughts?
I'll really quick hit there's also a phrase in there. Joe, I think we talked about this a long time ago on this same podcast, so I'll do it really fast. The other magic phrase that's in this is preferred method of managing wildlife. Hunting, fishing will be the preferred management. All that means is and this is the silly example I give everyone, but say tomorrow, 5 billion cardinals appeared in Florida. Before we went and looked at some kind of euthanasia or hiring sharpshooters or anything else, I would like for hunting to be considered. It doesn't mean it's the only way we can do it. It doesn't mean it shall be done that way. It just means it's the preferred method for managing fish and wildlife. And so you look at the invasive species that we have in our state, even in the fishery side, like if lionfish came in or whatever, we would prefer fishing to be one of the main management strategies for stuff like that. If we're needing to control a population, we want to encourage it to be controlled through hunting and fishing. That's all that means. So people will have questions about that sometimes, and we didn't touch on it. It's not a big deal. It's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty clear. And I'll also give a plug on All Florida's website. So if you go to allfla.org/R2FH, so R, the number 2 FH, we have most of this stuff we've discussed kind of laid out and like an FAQs about this. And we have the ballot language. We posted. As a nonprofit, we can't tell you how to vote. We can educate on an issue, though. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you as much information. Dylan can. I can't. So we're trying to give you as much information about this as we possibly can. And I will tell you, this is supported by, in the fishery side, Center for Swordfish Policy, like ASA, Florida Guides Association, CCA Florida, Bonefish Tarpon Trust, like everybody's in on this. Like no one is on the Salt Strong community. No one's in on it. What we really need help with though is your friends and family that don't fish or hunt, conveying to them the importance of this from a conservation standpoint.
I love it. And so you mentioned the one website. Where else could they go learn more?
You could also, we could send you a link to this, but there's also a pledge people could take that IOTR has put out, the International Order of T. Roosevelt. They've discovered that if you'll sign a pledge, it's no different than doing like a change.org petition or something else. I don't want to give it magic, but they've discovered if people will pledge to vote for something, they will actually show up and vote for it. Because I say all the time, regardless of the issue, apathy is what kills conservation in Florida. People saying, oh man, you last election, there were 1.4 million license holders in Florida that did not vote for anything, either party. Like,
wow.
So there wasn't even a hunting fishing thing on the ballot. Like apathy is what will kill this state. And Dylan and I see it all the time on meetings where people want to talk about all these controversial topics. We walk in the room and there's like 6 of us. And it's like no one is connected there to what's really going on. But then we'll get on Facebook afterwards and, piss and moan about how bad this is or how bad that is. Goliath grouper season was a great example. That was a small step in a good direction, whether we liked it or not. It was the right step at the right time. The Pelican concessions, we didn't like them. We didn't want to concede to them, but we were going to lose the entire pier. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I say conservation isn't convenient. If it was, it'd be really easy and a lot of people would do. So it's really important that people not be apathetic about this, not just kind of mail it in. Like if you're disenfranchised by other political things going on the ballot, go show up and take the pledge to vote on this thing. So we can give you, like I said, we can give you the link to the IOTR pledge. And anyway, it's just critically important. It's going to take a lot of people to get this passed. It's got to pass with 60% of the vote. Which means it's going to have to be bipartisan. Like you can't, which if you reflect on how we got it there, it was largely bipartisan. So it's more education, I think, at this point than anything else.
Cool. Love it.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. The IOTR website and the All Florida R2FH are the 2 places that are going to be the best to learn what you need to learn if you want to dive more into this and get a little bit more into the weeds, as Travis said.
Very cool.
Dylan and I are both happy to come speak. If you got a Rotary Club, if you've got a fishing club, if you got anything, either one of us will make time. And not just us, like Martha's done it. Mike Elfenbein's done it on the hunting. It's like, we are happy to go talk wherever we can talk. I don't care if you got a room with 10 people, we'll go talk about this and also the other stuff we work on. But like this is so critically important. We're happy to go wherever you need us to go. And I know your listeners are wide and varied and diverse around the state. So if you got a club or something we can come talk about, we're happy to do it.
Cool. And then finally, where can they go connect with you guys if they wanted to do some hunting or fishing with Hubbards?
Travis, go ahead.
The best place to find me is probably on Instagram or I think I'm full on Facebook, but Instagram is Travis Thompson. Just my name. And you can find our nonprofit at allfla.org on social or allfla.org. And then Duck Ranching is our hunting operation. No G at the end, Duck Ranching. And we're not as active on there this time of year, but that's if you want to come waterfowl hunt with us, you're welcome to come there. Dylan?
Love it.
And I'm just Hubbard's Marina on all the different social medias, so you can check it out. And hopefully we'll see you out in the water sometime soon.
That's not your tagline. Come on, man. We got to hear it.
Yeah. Like, is this real?
I know, right? I messed up, I guess. If you're too busy to go fishing, you're just too busy.
I love it. You can see Dylan on Fox, the fishing report there every week too. So guys, thank you so much. This is really, really helpful. We might even, this is, this is going live here in April, beginning of April. So we might even have to do another one. I'm sure there'll be more questions. And I think you're right. It's education and awareness and making sure we get people to show up and actually vote too. So thank you guys so much. If you guys have any questions, we'll put this in a blog at Salt Strong. All those will come to me and I can shoot them off to Travis and Dylan if there's any specific questions. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul, it was pain.